From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
I came across a little piece of tidbit of trivia I thought was interesting. It dates back to some time. It states that the bathtub was invented in 1850 and that the telephone was invented in 1875. And had you lived in 1850, you could have sat in the bathtub for the next 25 years without having the phone ring. Oh, yes. We have many intentions, I think, that we carry with us into life, or we learn in life. We have the intention to be happy. We have the intention to be perhaps wealthy, maybe to be secure anyway. We have intentions to marry, to have children, to have a home, the intention to travel, to get an education, the intention to be a good person, to make a difference in the world. And more. You, I'm sure, have other intentions that you may be living from. And most of our intentions actually have to do with us. They're centered in us and our lives. And amidst all of our many intentions, the most important intention to have or to cultivate is the intention to wake up spiritually. That is the reason that we are here. We're here to evolve as spiritual beings and to awaken and to expand and to broaden and deepen in our connection to the source that has given us life, and to awaken to a greater and clearer sense of who we are and who we are created to be and the true essence that is in us. And awakening to that is what adds to the dimension of life. And the goal is to be spiritually awake, to be spiritually conscious as a person. And it's to know then who you are, moment to moment, if at all possible, and to grow into living from the part of you that is of God. The part of you that is true, pure, whole, free, the part of you that is of the Spirit that dwells within you. And all of the masters and mystics and teachers really down through time have told us that there is a self, that there is a self of you and me that is biblically referred to as the image and likeness, made after the image and likeness of the source, of God. And that means that the real you is a being of unconditional love, of a freeing kind of peace and harmony, and a being of causeless joy. And by causeless joy, I mean you don't have to have something or a reason to be joyful. You just are joyful. That there's an essence to us all that can live from that place. And some of the ancients referred to that as being in bliss of sorts. There's an element of that can go on. And so it is this true self within that most all of us have to some extent fallen asleep to. And the result of the pulls and tugs of life and the many distractions and the many responsibilities and the many ways in which life and the world conditions us and kind of pulls us away from that part of ourselves. Now, we have all created, as these masters and mystics and teachers through time have told us, that we have created another self, a self that we have created that lays over the top, if you will, of the true self that we are. And it is referred to as the separate self, and separate from who you really are, separate from your true self, your God self, your sacred self, separate from the image and likeness self, if you will. And it's usually built on the basis of fears, where we lack faith, lack trust, are intimidated by our three-dimensional world and circumstances and conditions and what have you, and in our humanness. And so it's the part of us also that wants to be in control. Sometimes wants to retreat and hide, pull back, tends to maybe want to judge. And it feels at times separate and alone. Now, these two selves, interestingly enough, are depicted in a passage in the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 16. In that whole chapter, it seems that these two selves are evident. And it actually is the passage you're familiar with, and it's the passage where Jesus asks his disciples, who do men say that I am? And the answer, well, some say that you are Jeremiah, John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets, which seems to reflect the idea that there was a belief in reincarnation, that Jesus had returned from being an earlier prophet. Well, that's a talk for another day, of course, but and then Jesus asks, well, who do you say that I am? Not just others, but who do you say that I am? And it was Peter that said, well, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Thou art the Christ. And Jesus was very pleased by that. And he responded by saying, it wasn't flesh and blood that told you that. You see, it wasn't your outer eyes, it was another dimension. It was the essence in you. It was a higher self in you that saw the higher self in me. It was the Christ in you, the divinity in you that saw the divinity in me. That's wonderful, that's great, nice going. Really happy about that. And to paraphrase, Jesus says, and this is all in the passage, on this ability to see and behold the Christ self in me and in others, and upon one's faith in this God that dwells in you and me, it is upon this rock that I will build my church. That was the rock, the ability to see this self, this essence, that Christ had the divinity, the Christ within, but that we all have Christ in us, that we all have the divinity of God, that placed his Spirit, God placed his Spirit in all of us. As Paul, the Apostle Paul said, Christ in you, your hope of glory, joint heirs with Christ. What was he talking about? He was talking about there is a self in all of us that is made in the image and after the likeness of God. And if we can live from that and behold that, we'll all experience a dimension of oneness and another dimension of life that is offered to us. And this is what Jesus really came to talk about. And so in this same passage, we're still in chapter 16, okay? We're told that Jesus began to convey to the disciples that he was going to suffer many things, and that he was going to be killed, and that he would be raised from the dead in 3 days. And the next thing we're told is that Peter began to rebuke him. Peter's rebuking Jesus. Where does he get off thinking he can do that, right? But that's what it says. And basically, he tried to persuade Jesus that he was not going to die, that this wasn't going to happen, that what was going to happen really was that he was going to overthrow the Roman government, and that he would become king, and he would be sitting on a throne, and he would be ruling, and the Davidic kingdom in an outward way would be reestablished, and Peter and the disciples would be ruling alongside him as well and helping. And that was what the vision that he had, and he, I would say, was trying to control the situation. And Peter wanted the reward of the moment immediately in the external physical material world. He was about an outer kingdom. He was about an outer thing. And Jesus' whole teaching was about an inner dimension, an inner work, an inner kingdom. The kingdom of God is within you. It dwells within you. But they still hadn't gotten that yet. And so Jesus went from being very happy with Peter to being very disturbed by Peter, okay? Because we're still in this same chapter and passage. And Jesus said to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Whoa. Whoa. Get thee behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, he said. For you savor not the things that are of God, but those that are of men. In other words, he was putting personal interests above God and an inner kingdom. There were ego interests. And when we talk about ego, it doesn't mean I'm better than you. It means that I may think I'm less than you. It's whatever puts us in fear, you understand? So sometimes we target what ego really means. But ego, ego, is edging God out. Basically, it's the voice of separation within us. And it's this separate self. So the ego self and the separate self are one and the same. And Jesus called Peter Satan. But what's that about? You have to understand that actually Jesus spoke Aramaic. That was the language of his time. And so the word Satan, S-A-T-A-N, actually the root of that is sata, S-A-T-A, which means in Aramaic to mislead, to miss the mark, to slip, to slide, to deviate from one's course. Have we not deviated from our course from time to time? Have we not slipped? Did we not, on occasion, slide from who we really are and being who we are? And so we all, fall into that category at times. And then Jesus followed it up by saying this. We're still in the same passage. Okay. If anyone is to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Now he's saying, you must deny himself. There is a self of you that you must deny. You must not give it power, you see. It is the ego self or whatever. You have to take up the challenges of life as they come and follow these teachings and this truth of knowing who you are in the midst of it all. This higher self, this true self. And he further explains himself by saying, quote in this passage, "For whosoever will save his life shall lose it. And whosoever will lose his life for my sake," my sake meaning for the sake of my teachings, my truths, the Christ self, the higher self in you, you shall find it. Okay? So he's talking about, those who are saving life and those who will find life, or saving it, losing it, and all that. We're not talking about the physical body dying. He is clearly talking about a self of us that needs to die, the separation consciousness that needs to die, and in order to find the truth and live the life that he is offering us and trying to bring into our world. So he basically is saying whoever tries to save life as is, as the status quo, tries to control things, staying in the ego, will lose the kind of life that he is offering. And will lose the opportunity to wake up spiritually to your true self. And he says, whoever will lose his life, meaning for my sake, meaning to let go, to loose, to release the self that is separate and ego-driven, he who is willing to lose that will find life. He will really find his life and find the life that he's been offering. So the next statement summarizes things. And you get that he's really talking about these selves. He says, for what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? What does it profit a man, he's saying, or a person, if all your time is spent making gains only in the material world, being ego-driven, trying to look good at the expense of a stronger focus that one needs to have on your own inner soul growth? That has to be a big part of your life. Hello, I'm Reverend Howard Caesar, Senior Minister of Unity of Houston. Sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted a minute aside with you. Thank you first for tuning in to our program, and my hope is that you've been able to join us on a somewhat regular basis. Through this program, it is our desire to touch people's lives in a very positive way, support and enhance one's spiritual growth, and deepen their relationship with God. We've been televising to the greater Houston community for a number of years, and it has not been our practice to ask for donations or financial support. But today is an exception. Up until now, our ministry has covered the expenses of staff, editing, and TV airtime. However, due to the dip in the economy, in order to continue our weekly broadcasts and remain on TV, your support has become necessary. And keep in mind that a financial gift staying on the air will be a gift not only to yourself, but also to untold numbers of others who tune in and benefit. Any amount of support will greatly be appreciated, along with your prayers. Due to circumstances, some are able to give a smaller amount, and that's fine. Others may be able to give hundreds of dollars. It's all appreciated. And because in the end, it takes many thousands of dollars to be on TV, anyone who is capable and led to give $10,000 or more, I'll be happy to meet with personally if so desired. Again, thanking you for tuning in, thanking you for any help that you can be. Peace and blessings to you from Unity of Houston. So on our path and on our journey as spiritual beings, waking up, there are certain things that we have to come to grips with. There are certain things that are really important. And when you look at what the Buddha said, and the Buddha came as an avatar to the earth 500 years prior to Jesus. He was an awakened being, and he was teaching many of the same things that Jesus taught. They were in sync. But he said and pointed out that the lives of all beings are impacted by three things, or at least three things, and he stressed three things that all beings have to deal with: impermanence, ego-lessness, and suffering, or dissatisfaction, he called suffering. So impermanence, by that he means, that a person has to realize that in the physical world there are things that are not permanent. Okay? That things are always changing, they're fluid, they're in fluctuation. You're going to have to learn to deal with that in this world, in this three-dimensional world. And as humans, we have a tendency to resist that. We want things to stay the same. Steady the ship, man. Don't go changing everything. It's just, too hard on me. We want things to be static or kind of stay the same, go our way, have it our way. But the fact remains that things are not permanent. It's just not that way. And we experience loss. We have the loss of loved ones and pass on. And we have the loss of youth. And we have the loss of, we wear out clothes, we wear out cars and buildings and bodies and all kinds of things. And as humans, we think that security is found in certainty. I want certainty. And that certainty is found in keeping things the same. And it doesn't work. So that's a big thing to learn. It's not spending a whole lot of energy on trying to fight to keep things static and the same. It's having faith that you can be in a flow of life, knowing that life is going to have its gains and life is going to have its losses. And not to be attached to things too terribly much, but to accept the good when it's there and to release and let go and go on and stay in the moment as life continues on. It is to be more open. It is to be more flexible. It is to be able to get to the place where you accept what is. You see, as opposed to being resistant to it. Second thing that the Buddha said that we all need to learn is ego-lessness. And that is simply to be free of that self that is separate, of the ego. And it's to be free of, the self that sees itself separate from others, separate from the world, and really begin to move towards this consciousness of oneness. And when we're in our ego, we're basically centered on our own selves alone, pretty much. And, we think our likes should be everybody's likes. Our dislikes should be everybody's dislikes. That we judge anyone with differing views, differing opinions, differing beliefs, that somehow they're separate and apart, or they're wrong, or whatever, And ego-lessness is about staying open. It's staying flexible. It's working internally to remove the barriers that separate us from each other and the world. Third thing that Buddha said that we're here to learn is that we have to deal with some suffering or dissatisfaction. You're going to have dissatisfactions. Everyone faces this. It's a part of life. And so when we tend to want permanence to be our experience in an impermanent world, we suffer, all right? When you can't get what you want, when you can't have it stay the way you want it, then we resist whatever the change has been, and we fight it, and that's called suffering, until we finally get to the place where we accept what is and be able to find the strength to go forward in it. Sometimes different isn't bad, but we sometimes frame it that way. And so it's really, suffering is a function of the mind. You're really up against the mind, and it's mostly resistance to this accepting of what is. If we can't control things and have things the way that we want them, when we want them, we become dissatisfied. We suffer. We even set timelines, for ourselves, or that others set for us that we buy into, should be married by this age, should have a child by this age, should have this much money by this age, should be able to retire by this age. We set all kinds of timelines, and we suffer if we're not there, or we're not getting there at the right time, or we're not having it happen at the right time. So just, it's an activity of the mind, a function of the mind. And sometimes we get what we want, and sometimes we don't. Things happen, things go wrong, things go as not expected. Unfulfilled expectations bring forth dissatisfaction or suffering. There are circumstances that can be difficult and challenging always in life. You know, there are things we can't change, we have no control over. You know, we can't bring back a loved one. We can't bring back our pet, dog or cat or whatever that was so dear to us. You know, we grieve, we suffer for a time, and then finally we accept, and then we go on. And when we continue to resist something and resist what is, well, we'll suffer as long as we resist what is. So I think of those that come back from battles, war, with wounds and even amputations. It has to be very difficult to make your peace with having lost a limb. Prayers go out to those folks. Some battle with that for a long time because they can't accept what is. They can't accept not having that limb, and they're miserable, they're unhappy, and they may make the people around them miserable and unhappy. And you know, but when a person finally gets to the place where they accept it, then they stop suffering, and then they're able to go on, and then their life opens up, and they make the best of it, whatever that might be. And it's again back to a battle of the mind, like all things. And they may have to find a mantra that says, you know, I'm more than my physical body. The essence of me is whole, you know. The spirit of me is whole, and therefore I'm going to come from the spirit of me and not think I'm a body only. You know, the God within me is greater than any circumstance. There's some mantra they have to get and grab hold of that propels them forward. Now, a huge part of waking up spiritually is the matter of honesty. And we're talking specifically about self-honesty, you know. Within our consciousness, there are parts of us that we hide. You know, we don't, you know, we hide ourselves, parts of ourselves from others and from ourselves even. There are things about ourselves that we don't want to look at sometimes, we don't want to deal with, we're not ready to, whatever. And many a person, if they were honest, would probably say, you know, if others could really see inside of me, and see my fears, and see my doubts, and see my beliefs and my opinions and my limiting ideas and thoughts about myself and whatever, they would be probably pretty surprised. I don't let them see that. And so in not dealing with those things, that brings on suffering. That brings on internal struggle. That brings on internal conflict. In relationships, many are not always able to open up and share. They avoid issues. They can grow apart and get into the habit of holding on to things and sitting on things. In a book written by Adyashanti, he tells a story about a student that came, a student of a Zen master. And the student was being groomed to be a teacher of Zen as well. So he was pretty far along and so forth. And he came to the point where he shared with his Zen teacher that he and his wife were not getting along. And so they had been married for a significant amount of time. They had 3 children. But he was angry at him because she felt that he was becoming more and more distant, that he was actually even using his path to be a Zen, to spend less time with the kids and the family. And both he and his wife were students of this teacher, this Zen, and so he recommended that they come to this particular retreat that he was going to have. And so they went to the retreat, and they were expecting that they would be involved in periods of deep meditation and remaining in silence and in Zen and time looking inward and all that. And so when it began, the Zen master took them aside and said, I have another retreat planned for you guys. We have, aside from the temple here where the retreat's going on, we have a bedroom set up for you guys, and I want you to go and spend 24 hours in bed. I don't want you to leave the bed except to go to the restroom or to food. Food will be brought in. So they said, okay. So they went and spent 24 hours, and then after 24 hours, they came back and reported into the Zen master, and whatever they reported, he said, stay in bed 24 more hours. And so they went back for 24 hours. Now, this was a 7-day retreat. And for 7 days, they were in bed 24 hours, okay? And at the end of the retreat, they had really reconnected. And they had really gotten close. They had shared. It saved their marriage. And the Zen teacher was aware that one of the tendencies of even the person who is in pursuit of spirituality may use spirituality as a basis for, pulling away, retreating, isolating, whatever. And that basically when a person has a life of meditation and spiritual growth and awakening, it's not to lead one to any kind of isolation, it's to lead you even more powerfully into engaging with life and engaging with others. That's the goal. And so waking up spiritually does not mean that everything either is perfect or is going to be perfect by any means. You don't get to have the perfect job and the perfect spouse and the perfect marriage and the perfect this and the perfect that because you're spiritual. It just doesn't work that way. Things happen. Jesus was crucified. So it means that you've been given tools to be more honest with yourself and to look at the things that you need to become more conscious of and become a witness of in your inner world that need to be healed and to be changed and transformed and taken into living from your higher self as opposed to your separate self. And so it means waking up spiritually and it involves a honest and compassionate self-inquiry. To be able to be doing that, the inner workings. You have to ask yourself, what happens inside of me when I become afraid? What happens inside of me when life squeezes me into some discomfort, into some new challenge or some new change? What are the stories that I make up within myself, that I tell myself, that create separation from others and even separation from myself? Stories that I make that build a case for my rightness and others' wrongness. What pushes my buttons? What is it that triggers me? What charges do I have? What sets me off? And can I look at that? What are my cravings? And I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about a craving for praise, a craving for external love and approval, a craving for having to be perfect, a craving to be right, to have power, to be important, to have significance. What are they? What sends me into hiding? And see, just noticing and witnessing and becoming conscious of these things is the first big, huge step. And then dialoguing with the God within your higher self is the next step. And then making yourself and others free always to be, allows you to become all the more free. This one writer says, everybody is free to be as they are until the whole world is free to agree with you or disagree with you, until you have given the freedom to everyone to like you or to not like you, to love you or hate you, to see things as you see them or to see things differently. Until you have given the whole world its freedom, you'll never have yours. Most important intention to have is to wake up spiritually. And if a person is truly sincere about that, the Spirit of God will come pouring, rushing, streaming in to help guide you and help you become aware of the things to release, to let die, so that the real you might be born into the fullness of life we're meant to have. And may that be so for all of you. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.